If you've ever felt behind because you weren't taught, I'm about to introduce you to someone who proves that missing out on financial education early in life doesn't doom you to financial struggle forever. Whether you're 25 or 55, whether your parents sat you down for money talks or not, your financial education can start today. And my guest today is living proof of exactly that. I'm talking today with Prisca Benson, a registered nurse who went from making what she calls a crap ton of money mistakes to building over 240,000 in investments in just 5 years. That's amazing. That's impressive. She's now a money coach who helps professional women fill in those missing financial pieces that many of us never learned growing up. This isn't about being smart or stupid with money. It's not about having the right background or the perfect financial upbringing. It's about taking simple, consistent steps that anyone can learn and implement, regardless of where you're starting from. So, if you've ever felt behind because you weren't taught, this conversation is for you. Prisca, welcome to the show. I'd love for you to introduce yourself and tell us a bit about your background.
Yes. So as you said, I'm a nurse by trade. And I started when I graduated nursing school, that to me was like the win, right? Being a child of Haitian immigrants, like that was the thing of success. Like you graduated
Hmm.
school and during school I had incurred a little bit of debt and, we're living kind of hand to mouth in the college way. Okay. Um,
Right.
and so to me, once I got that job, I'm like, yes, like this is the solve to any money concerns I've ever had, right?
Right.
But then things came that showed me that I wasn't very savvy. But I wasn't even aware that I wasn't savvy. It was more through like learning how to money
Right.
well that I've like, oh man, like shouldn't have done that, shouldn't have done that. So, but I don't even take those as mistakes, even though in general, like if you looked at personal finance and you saw like the definition of financial mistakes, there would be a whole list of them. But it's how I grew to learn. And I also feel
Hmm.
like it helps me relate to the people I've come to help. And the reason I even started to do money coaching, even though, I make good income as a nurse and I don't need another gig, but it was the fact that I realized that I'm not the only person that didn't know this. And that kind of shocked me because there were a lot of people around me, very smart people, who I just thought I wasn't aware, but a lot of people did not know like all these things, all these strategies I was learning. So that's what led me to teach others. People were asking me budgets for them at the nurses station. So these are all things
Hmm.
that led me to where I am today, helping women to create a simple plan for their money so they can live their best life now while also securing their future.
That's awesome. And I love that story because it really challenges this idea that some people are just naturally good with money and others aren't. I came from a similar background. I didn't really know much about money. My parents weren't necessarily bad with money, but they weren't educated with money
Mhm.
either, right? So like they did budget, they did live within their means, all those kind of things, but that was about the upper limit. And you can get so far with that in life. But if you really want to build wealth, you need a little bit more than that. Now, you mentioned that your parents worked incredibly hard, but the financial guidance wasn't something you grew up with. So, mind you, this is some of the information I pulled from your website as well. So maybe you didn't say it necessarily on this
Yeah.
podcast, but I went and looked at your website to pull some information. So, my first question is this: what do you say to people who don't think they can get better with money because they were never taught?
I say that money management is a skill and skills are meant to be taught and learned. So this is not outside of anybody's capability. Like you mentioned before, some people feel like, you have to have a certain aptitude for it. The fact of the matter is we all need to know it, right? It's
Right,
like for some areas in this country, like you have to know how to drive, like, or else you wouldn't get anywhere. So
right,
money is
exactly.
something that affects every single person. So to say that, oh, because I wasn't taught and now I'm never going to get it right is doing a disservice to yourself. And then also, some people might say, oh, well, I don't have a math aptitude or this. Like, there's no one way to money, right? You find the way that best works for you, which does take some trial and error. I think that's what people are more afraid of than not
Yes.
that, oh, I can't learn this thing, but I don't want to make mistakes. And you have to be willing to make mistakes in order to grow.
Absolutely. And I think that's something that's a good point because a lot of people, because of the way we've been conditioned with money to see it as literally gold, even though it's exactly the opposite of gold. We have this aversion to losing or to making mistakes, like
Mhm.
you said. And if you're not taught by somebody else, the only way to figure it out is to make the mistakes, right? Or the quote unquote mistakes and learn. And I like the way you phrase that. That's such an important reframe here. I think a lot of people, they use the "I wasn't taught" almost as a shield against trying, when it really should be the starting point for learning. You mentioned that your financial journey really took off after nursing school. Walk me through that transformation.
Well, I like this tell the story. So when I graduated from nursing school in 2011, this is when the kind of the crux or the epitome of all the mistakes came because when you don't have money, there's only but so many mistakes you can make, and then when you
Right.
have it, it's like whoa. So in that first year, I bought 2 new cars. Okay, I had bought a
Oh.
car, and then I was like, during the maintenance for the first maintenance, they let you like borrow a car, and I was like, I like this car better, and traded it in. Um,
Mm-hmm.
my first 401k, which in the healthcare industry is a 403b, I cashed that out. I always had my credit cards maxed out, and this was just the norm because the thing is, growing up as a child of immigrants, and it depends on people have different experiences where people are either hyper savers or they're huge into debt. That's what I've seen in my experience with anybody
Mm-hmm.
with immigrant background. And so my dad was a hyper saver. My mom was more into leveraging debt for all the things. So to me, having maxed out credit cards is nothing. Like it was just a normal
Right.
everyday thing. But then I got married in 2013, and my husband like could do stuff with his paychecks, and I could not. I was paying,
Mm-hmm.
Visa and MasterCard and Discover, and I was like, wow, like I've never even imagined the life like where
Yeah.
like you could do stuff with your paychecks, like you could save your money. And so that was the beginning like impetus for change. And so we started to be more intentional with money, but that was kind of like the bulk of it all. Cause I think like, at least for in my experience too with African Americans, like saving is kind of the thing. Like you want to be able to see the dollar. So that's kind of
Mm-hmm.
like the max potential we had at that time. And then so my husband in 2018 started listening to, I think, Bigger Pockets or something like that. I
Yes.
was reflective, and I was like, my net worth does not feel like that of a nurse. We were at this point, we're doing okay with money, like we're
Mm-hmm.
saving, we're not going into debt for our things, but still, I'm like, saving is a slow way to grow wealth. It's pretty much
Mm-hmm.
impossible to be wealthy
Right.
by just
You can't
saving.
you
So
can't out yeah, you can't outrun inflation by saving.
no, you absolutely cannot. So
Right.
when when I realized that my net worth didn't feel like that of a nurse, like people kind of assume you're a nurse, you're rich, and I'm like, there's nothing about my net worth that looks like rich. I
Mm-hmm.
started listening to personal finance podcasts as well. I actually started with Jean Chatsky's Her Money podcast, and
Mm-hmm.
she interviewed the guys from the True Spy podcast, and they
Mm-hmm.
were talking about financial freedom. And I've never heard this term before. Like it was not even on
Mm-hmm.
like near my radar. And I'm a smart cookie. Okay, if I say so myself. And so I was like, what is this? And they're talking about savings rate and maxing out your retirement. And I'm like, I've never even heard of people even trying to max out anything retirement wise. So
Right.
I really delved deep into learning those concepts. And even then I wasn't even fully convinced that I could achieve or even aim for financial freedom. But I'm the kind of person that I'm like, I'm gonna take what I can get from this and see how far I can get. And
Mm-hmm.
well, we discussed at the beginning, like how far I got. And actually today, my accounts are worth over $430,000, $440,000. And I'm just
Mm-hmm.
like, I don't even know, like it didn't take a lot of effort to get here. And so I just
Right.
want, like, to me, this is such a great example of what applying the knowledge that you're getting can get you.
Mm-hmm. Absolutely. And again, I had a very similar story. I started working in tech before I graduated from college. I started at 16 years old. And at a certain point, I started listening to some various different personal finance podcasts, but I also had not run across the concept of financial independence, let alone the FIRE thing or anything like that. And it wasn't until a little bit later, I want to say I was in my mid to late 20s when I finally ran into it. And the concept intrigued me, but it's for the same thing as you. I was like, how do we even approach this? What am I even supposed to do here? But luckily, I took some simple advice and just started investing immediately as much as I could into retirement accounts. And then lo and behold, by the time I got to my early 30s, I had reached a point where I didn't need to work anymore. I wanted to keep working. And so while I have nothing against the FIRE movement, I support them in everything they do. I'm not a FIRE person. I'm half of that. I'm FI, which is financially independent. but I don't ever intend to retire, right? Like in the strict sense of the term, right?
Yeah.
Which is like you walk away and you just like go off into the sunset and do nothing. I can't do that. So my retirement, if you want to call it that, is this podcast, and there's two other podcasts I have too. They have nothing to do with finance. They're over on the media side of the world. But that's kind of my retirement job now. And so it keeps me incredibly busy. And then I also have two small kids. So yeah, I totally understand exactly where you're coming from. You learn about it, and then it's kind of like this amazing epiphany. You're like, wait a minute, I can do more with what I have. And then you also realize how incredibly lucky and privileged you are to generate that kind of income to be able to get to the point of becoming financially independent or having financial freedom, right? Because not everybody in this country, and definitely not everybody in this world,
Mm-hmm.
has that opportunity, right? Now, here's also what I find fascinating. When we were talking before this, I had mentioned to you that my sister is also an RN. She graduated in 2019, right before COVID hit. And I've heard the stories, and I've often said that nurses are the backbone of the medical industry. If it wasn't for nurses, that industry would collapse on itself. So here's what I find fascinating. You're someone who dedicated your career to helping others as a nurse, but then you had to learn how to help yourself financially. Why did you start this personal finance endeavor as a nurse? And kind of what was your aha moment, that kind of like linking of the two and deciding this is what I want to do going forward?
Yeah. And there wasn't a particular one moment, right? I feel like there was a lot of little things that added up to this, but the biggest moment that clicked for me was the fact that I don't know why I had this moment where I thought my net worth doesn't look like that of a nurse. And for
Mm-hmm.
whatever reason, around this time, my husband started listening to podcasts. We never listened to podcasts before this. And so I'm like, let me see what's there for personal finance. And here it just so happened to fall that way. Nowadays, I feel like there's so much content and there's so much, like a lot of this is
Mm-hmm.
available on social. And like, it felt like it was very much like you either went to blogs or podcasts at the time. Now it's everywhere. So I think it's more available. But to
Mm-hmm.
me, like this was like, whoa, like this is the only place I could find this. And so not only is it that, I'm helping myself then financially, then I see like the effects this is having on other people. Like first of all, I would start having conversations with like other staff members about money,
Mm-hmm.
like not me even initiating it. They bring up something, I'm like, oh, I know about this now. So I can participate
Mm-hmm.
in this conversation and I could recognize the gaps that they had in their knowledge, which is something we do a lot as nurses. Like it's finding the gaps in the knowledge of our patients so that we can fill them and so that they could be
Right.
more literate in regards to their healthcare. So I was doing that. Then, like, because I was so passionate about like these money topics, people would be like, can you look at my budget? Can you make this work for me? And so seeing people's relief, because a lot of people feel like they don't have enough. And that is a
Mm-hmm.
horrible like feeling to live with every day, right? Is that I don't have
Right.
enough. And it's this whole scarcity and lack kind of feeling. And then when I go through their finances, the majority of the time they have enough. And I just kind of show them. And the relief that came across their faces to me was just something that was so touching to me. Like I can
Mm-hmm.
bring hope to people who had this unnecessary stress that was weighing on
Right.
them. And stress could be a killer in itself.
Oh,
So
absolutely.
how much better for their health and their mental health, their physical health, for them to not feel this one thing that we can control for sure is the finances.
Absolutely. And that's one of the things that I key in on this podcast. One of the reasons I started it was my best friend is neurodivergent, as are both of my children. And I know many other people who are also neurodivergent, and almost all of them struggle with money. And it mostly is because their psychologies don't align very well with money. And of course, we're being bombarded 24/7, 365 by a consumerist society
Yes.
trying to take us down. But one of the things I would note is a similarity, if you want to call it that, between nursing and personal finance is the whole concept of advocating for yourself, right? And this is something that I had to learn both on the finance side, but especially on the healthcare side. Growing up, I always assumed, and I know seems kind of dumb in retrospect, but I assumed that the system was there to take care of me and was there to help me, right? It's a health care system. It's not a health take system
Yeah.
or a health scam system. And then I realized later that unfortunately, while there are many people in the industry who absolutely are there for the right reasons and want to help people, the industry itself at the very top is just driven by money, right?
Yeah.
And so you at the end of the day have to advocate for yourself with your healthcare, just like you do with finance. So the example you gave earlier really resonated with me, because just like you work with your patients to close that gap or fill in the gap in terms of their healthcare knowledge so they can advocate for themselves and take care of themselves. That's what I am trying to do. And I assume you're trying to do on the finance side, right? Give people the
Yes.
information to advocate for themselves, right? Teach them how to fish, don't give them the fish.
Yeah.
I wanted to also talk a little bit and do a little bit of contrasting, because you mentioned your husband earlier and how he approached finances and then how you approach finances and how you learned from him. I think a lot of people can relate to that moment because they will see someone else doing something completely different, right, with their money. And then like, wait a minute, why is that person doing that? And how are they doing that?
Mm-hmm.
You mentioned some of the early mistakes of like buying the 2 cars and all of that, but those are 2 big ticket items. And I feel like there are many people out there who that's not their mistake. They didn't make the big ticket
Mm-hmm.
items. It's like a series of 1,000 paper cuts, right? They're making a bunch of small little mistakes that at the end of the day result in compound interest working against them with debt. So what are some of the early mistakes that you made? And more importantly, some of the first simple steps you took to kind of just turn that around? Because it's another thing I want to make sure our audience hears here is like, you might hear this podcast episode and walk out thinking, I got it. I know exactly what to do. But it's a ship. It's not a little boat, right? You got to kind of make minute adjustments to get yourself back on course. So give us some examples, and what are the small things you did to get yourself back in alignment to reach your goals?
Yeah. So some, smaller mistakes, it's hard to even call them small because of how I was at the time, where my credit cards were maxed out literally consistently.
Mm-hmm.
Okay. And I would just pay them down to have room to put money on them again. Now, I look at it now, like, why wouldn't I just, if I was gonna like just save up the money, then pay
Mm-hmm.
for the thing? It just wasn't a concept for me back then. So I would, and two, being the nurse, and when we went out, like, I'm like, oh, I'll pay, and I'll,
Right.
I can afford to do this. My shoe closet was insane. Like, I was obsessed with shoes. Couldn't possibly even wear
Mm-hmm.
all the shoes I've bought. So, and even further down the line, even when I was starting to get better with money, things like Prime Day would get me.
Mm-hmm.
My living room would be an
Oh yeah.
Amazon warehouse.
Mm-hmm.
And so, and even with things like ShopRite, like going to the grocery store, like Thanksgiving season, it's like, if you spend this amount, you'll get a free turkey. Well, when I start to think
Mm-hmm.
later on, like now I'm like, I could just buy the turkey. Like, I don't
Yeah.
need a
Yeah.
free turkey. So in terms of like small things I did, one is like to actually come face to face with my money. This is a very uncomfortable thing for a lot of people, because they don't want to see the damage, or like,
Mm-hmm.
or I don't even want to call it the damage, because I don't think money is inanimate, like this is not
Right.
pass
It's
fail.
not
This is
real.
not bad good. It's just what is working for you and what isn't. And so
Mm-hmm.
for me, like getting face to face with what I was spending. So at one point I was tracking my expenses. I don't do that so, specifically now, like where I'm like, nickel and diming myself. But I think to start, it's important to know exactly where you stand so that you can
Mm-hmm.
ask yourself, is the way I'm spending in alignment with what I want? Am I buying
Right.
things that I don't even think about, don't even use?
Right.
Am I doing things because society makes me feel like I need to do this? Like when you go to work and all your coworkers go to lunch and you feel like you have to buy lunch too. Do you even care to do that? Like, is it good for your health? Is it good for your goals? Like, these are
Mm-hmm.
all the things that we have to force ourselves to think about. So this is how I had to um, analyze myself and my spending and see if this was in alignment. Then over time, things that I was doing, actually not even just over time. Once I started listening to the podcast about like maximizing your retirement account. So I actually
Mm-hmm.
started to like have a vision for like the future of my money. I had no vision. I would say that's another step. Having a
Mm-hmm.
vision for your money. And I was like, okay, what would it take for me to max out my retirement account? So at the time I was contributing 6% because that's what my company was matching. And
Mm-hmm.
then I did the math real quick. Now you can just do this with ChatGPT. Like, hey,
Right.
how
Yeah.
much, based on my income, how much I'm contributing now, how much would it take for me to max out for retirement this year? And when I did the math, it said 20%. And I was like, wow, I could never even imagine like
Mm-hmm.
contributing 20%. Like, that's a lot of money. So the simplicity of it all is that like you could just log in and try this. You could even,
Right.
in fact, you don't even have to try it for real. A lot of the retirement apps and stuff, you can just see before you even make the decision, oh, how will this affect my paycheck? A lot of them have that feature.
Right.
So I didn't even bother with that. I was like, I knew this 20%. I'm going to try it once. And then if I hate it, I'll just log back in and switch it back down. I
Right.
didn't hate it. And then I was like, let's see how long I can go like this. And I've basically never stopped doing it since.
Yeah.
So the takeaway I want for people to have from this is you definitely have to start somewhere. You're not going to look at somebody's, 5 years down the line, 10 years down the line and say, I want that today. That's not going to happen. But
Right.
you can start somewhere. And then all the times that you're learning and adapting and like iterating, like that will get you there. And so a big thing I like to tell my community is like, there's nothing get rich quick about my community. It's get rich
Mm-hmm.
slowly and
Exactly.
consistently.
Same here. 100%. Yep. And
Yep.
I went through the same thing. I was like, okay, I started off with maxing out my 401k.
Mhm.
And then I said, well, what else can I do? Now, Roth IRAs weren't around, I think, when I first started investing. I want to say they came later. I could be wrong about that. But then I discovered the Roth and I said, okay, well, let me max that out. And then it turned into, okay, I'm maxing those two out every single year. Now what else can I do?
Yep.
Okay, we'll go to a taxable brokerage, right?
Mhm.
And then I started doing that. And then, like you said, now you can just ask ChatGPT all this stuff, right? But I actually had to sit down and make a spreadsheet and figure out like what these future calculations look like and run
Yeah.
Monte Carlo simulations. And then one day I was like, okay, I think I've got it. Let me go double check. And so I said, okay, if I take this amount and if I never contribute to my 401k again, right? But I keep doing my Roth IRA and I keep doing my taxable brokerage and I just leave the 401k alone, when I'm 59 and a half, what is it going to be worth? And that was the day, this was around, I want to say I was around 32, 33 or so. And I saw the number and I was like, okay, that is more than enough to retire on, right? But it's a retirement account, so I can't touch it until I'm 59 and a half.
Yeah.
I've got over 20 years to get there. So what am I going to do to bridge that gap? So that's when I stopped contributing to my 401k and only contributed to my Roth and my taxable after that. Because like the deferred stuff, I know I have to pay taxes for it down the road, right? So I said, I'm good. I know I have enough to retire now, but I'm gonna have to pay taxes on it. Let me focus on the stuff that I either don't have to pay tax on at all, or I can pay the lower tax rate with capital gains, right? So I started kind of pivoting. That's a little bit more advanced. I don't cover that too much on this podcast, but as you said, everybody has to start somewhere, right? And one of the things I like to remind people is a lot of people will look at that, and you mentioned this is not a get rich quick scheme. It absolutely isn't. It's a get rich slow scheme, right? If you want to call it that. But here's the thing a lot of people get wound up about. They can't mentally figure out how saving $5 or $10 matters 20 or 30 years from now, right? And so there's another podcast out there. They're called The Money Guys.
Yeah,
I love their podcast. And they have this little koozie that they put up on their set, and it says something like, I can't remember exactly what it says, but it's something like, this beer cost me $80 or $88 or something like that. And the concept is $1, just $1, right? Invested when you're very young, like you're 20 years old, or I forget what the numbers were, but it was in their 20s. By the time they retire, compounding with interest in broad market index fund is $88. $1 becomes $88, right? So if you look at it like that, then imagine what $10 is. That's $880, right? $100, $8,800, right? So that's how that scales. And so I think when people can picture it in their mind that, yes, it's only $5 or $10 or a couple of $100 or maybe $1,000, but what that is 20 or 30 years down the line is way more than that, right? And that's what exactly. And that's what I'm trying to teach people. This is how you get there because of the compounding effect of money. So I want to make sure people understand none of this is get rich quick. We're not trying to tell you to go jump on the latest, whatever. Like that one of the things that really disappoints me about social media and even YouTube is you have people who are like, hey, you should buy this indexed universal life policy because this is great for your retirement. And it's like, there are places for those kind of things, but it's very rare that actually matters.
Yeah.
Everyone has access to either a 401k, a 403b, or at the very least, everyone has access to an IRA, a Roth IRA, or a taxable brokerage.
Yep.
So anybody can do that. It doesn't belong to your employer. You're not bound by somebody else's rules, right? Of course, the IRS rules always apply. You can't cheat that. But aside from that, everyone has access. Anyone can do it, right? Literally anyone that's in this country can do it. So I want people to start looking into that and realizing all of that.
The one
So,
thing I just wanted to add to
mhm,
the disappointment of what I see on social media, to me, the most disappointing thing is to see people succeeding, doing well, and saying one of two things: either that they're lying, which I'm not saying there's no liars on social media, but I wouldn't assume that. I would
mhm,
prefer you ask, how did you do it? And then the other disappointing thing I hear or see is, well, I can't do that. And what I dare to say to these people, like, oh, I can't save $200 every paycheck. Save 20.
mhm.
Save 2, for
Yeah,
God's sake. Just
yeah,
do something on purpose instead of just living in the I just can't. I just can't. I didn't think
exactly.
that financial freedom was not on my radar, okay, when I started
Mhm.
learning all these things. And even when I was learning it from people that did not look like me. So I did not know that this was actually something that people like me could accomplish. I was just like, I'm going to do the best I can to get as close as possible to what these people are doing. And then that's what led me
Exactly.
to where I am today. So instead of looking at people and be like, either by like saying like whatever they did, that's impossible that they did that, or saying that what they did is not possible for you, I encourage you to reframe that and say, how
Yep.
can I achieve some level of that success?
Exactly. And the other thing I will add to that is nowadays, the opportunities are everywhere.
Mm-hmm.
So, when I first started investing, you couldn't really do your own taxable, you could have your own
Yeah.
taxable brokerage, but you had to do a lot of stuff through agents,
Mm.
and the commissions were insane to buy
Yes.
and trade a stock. And yes, they were mutual funds. And so, really, the only option you had that was credible when I started was your 401k or your 403b. And then later on, the Roth and then a regular IRA. But even then, there were often like, these trading fees involved in your
Mm-hmm.
taxable brokerage, right?
Yes.
Whereas now it's completely free,
Yeah.
right? I just released an episode a week ago or so, maybe two, about how to start up with Robinhood,
Mm-hmm.
right? Like you just download the app and install it and you can start investing immediately,
Yeah.
right? And so your whole point of like, well, I can't, download Robinhood. And I'm not like an advocate or I don't get paid by Robinhood. Pick anyone, pick Betterment, pick Wealthfront. Hell, if you want to go with the old guys, Fidelity, Schwab, and Vanguard, what doesn't matter? Download the app, sign up for the account. You can buy and sell for free,
Mm-hmm.
right? Now, I say buy and sell. I buy, I don't sell. But you can buy for free. The opportunity that people have nowadays just wasn't there when I started. And on the one hand, I totally get it. I see how the economy is today. I feel sorry for so many people of how bad it is. But on the other hand, it's like, but you also have so many more opportunities that people my age or my parents' age or my grandparents' age never had. So if you want to use the term, the lowliest of us have
Mm-hmm.
access to so much today that we would not have had even 10 years ago, 15 years ago,
And on
right?
that
So,
note, in terms of accessibility, one of the things I was noting, because my husband invests in real estate, and the stuff that you have to go through to buy a house is so much work. And
mhm,
then people could actually make it harder by looking at you and deciding that you're not worthy of what you're trying to
mhm,
accomplish, right? So the person who does the appraisal can rule your appraisal less because you're a person of
oh yeah,
color. The person who's the mortgage broker can not want to do a deal with you because you're a person of color. But you know what? Where race does not matter, investing in the stock market, nobody cares.
that
You
the
can,
only color
and
they care about is green.
that and
That's
everybody
it.
has the same opportunity. And like you said, now there used to be a dollar amount you need to reach in order to even
Mhm,
invest. That doesn't even exist for the most part anymore. It exists some
right,
places, but very few. So
right.
accessibility, it's accessible to anyone.
Literally anyone. Yeah. And I had a similar story. I don't own real estate anymore. I used to. I've owned and sold homes before. And I'm one of those people that says, I never want to own a home again.
Mhm.
And I realize that that is like completely contrary to what the American psyche is,
Mhm.
right? But it's one of those where I've done it. I know what it's like. And I experienced something very similar to what you're telling me, which is I lived for 3 years in New Orleans. And when my wife and I were looking at renting an apartment at first, And much like New York and some other areas, you get a realtor to help you find an apartment,
Mhm.
right? Whereas it's not like that my wife and I are from Texas. It's not like that there at all. You just literally just walk up to the apartment that you want to live in and sign a lease, right? It's very simple. But it wasn't like that in New Orleans. So we hired a realtor, a great lady. And at a certain point, she pulled me aside and she said, look, I'm just going to tell you the truth here. In this market, you're better off just buying the house because the rent is going to be the same as the mortgage. And there's a lot of houses here that they call doubles where you can buy it and then rent out the other side.
Mhm.
The other side will cover your mortgage. And like she pitched the whole thing to me and I realized it was a sales pitch, but at the end of the day, she was correct.
Mhm.
So my wife and I found this amazing little house, but Louisiana is its own thing. So we decided to buy it. We go to the agent and say, we want to buy the house. Great. Everything goes through. We get to the point where you're supposed to do all the paperwork for it, right? And the people, as you mentioned, the people sitting around the table are not like me,
Yeah.
right? And they asked me, okay, and so how are you going to do the down payment? And I said, let me get my checkbook out. And they were like, oh, you can't do that. I said, what do you mean I can't do that? No, you can't write a personal check. I said, why not? Well, we need either a cashier's check or a wire. And I said, well, I'm just going to write you a check. Well, you can't do that. Are you concerned? Well, it's a personal check. How are we sure? And I'm like, well, you can wait until it clears and then we're good, right? They gave me all this drama. I literally had to go through like this entire rigmarole to get a cashier's check, mind you, because I don't bank in Louisiana, right?
Mhm.
I bank at Fidelity. So it was like, okay, what am I supposed to do here?
Yeah.
And I had this strong feeling that was not because it was a policy, it was a distrust issue, right?
Mhm.
And so it didn't matter. We ended up buying the house and we lived in there for 3 years. Then we turned it into a rental property. That's when I discovered, now this is the interesting part. That's when I discovered after renting it out for several more years after we moved out of it, that I never wanted to own a home again. And I never wanted to be a landlord again.
Mhm.
Those are two things I never wanted to do again. And I get it. I'm like, my best friend's super into real estate. So, hey, if that's your thing, knock yourself out. Great. It's not for me, right? That's just my personal thing. It's not for me. But to your point, I went through that same realization that there are so many barriers for all these other types of businesses and different cash flow types, whereas the stock market only sees one color.
Yeah.
They don't care. Pivoting that over towards your community and how you're teaching people and you're coaching people. I know that you have a system that's like 3 simple steps, right? 3 simple steps to get you from where you are to where you want to be. So can you give us a little bit of information about what those 3 simple steps are? And then like, how do you approach that in tools and how does that system work?
So when I'm meeting with a client for the first time, the first thing is like getting the lowdown on what their actual financial situation is. So, what are their expenses? What are they spending money on? Outside of like your housing, things there's like the fixed expenses and the variable expenses, and then just kind of like the stuff that just happens and you don't even notice it. And so that's the first thing we work on is like looking to see like where are there improvements that can be made here. And when I say improvements, I'm not looking necessarily to look for areas to make your life miserable. There are different schools of thought on how to manage your money when you're on your debt payoff journey or when you are trying to save up for something particular. My school of thought is you could do whatever you want, just know the full picture. Meaning,
Mm,
some people are like, you shouldn't vacation if you're in debt. I don't believe that. You know, if vacationing is important to you, especially in nursing, we have very stressful jobs. And to say that
mm-hmm.
somebody's debt payoff journey may take 4, 5, 10 years and they can't take a vacation in that time, to me is outrageous. But
Right.
there comes the trade-off of my clients know, like, yes, my journey may take an extra year or 2, 3, but allows me to live now. And so
Right.
helping people understand that is kind of like the first thing is like, hey, we're going to look at your expenses. We're going to see if there's anything we can optimize, but what is actually like of value to you? So that's like my second step is like
Mm-hmm.
making sure, because it's important to me to create a budget for them that's going to work,
Right.
not just a budget that exists so that you can say you have a budget, but a budget that you're going to use consistently, because that's what I found worked for me and worked for a lot of my clients. Whereas like the budget is the same in theory, right? It's not going to be the same
Yep.
dollar amount. You do get raises or you get pay cuts, whatever the case may be. But in theory, the principles of what you value are in every single budget, and then you just put it on repeat. So every paycheck, you're like, I know what to do with this money. I know what to do with this money. And then
Right.
that's the end result. So first off is looking at where people are right now. Second is addressing the values and making sure that that gets reflected. And then is creating the actual budget that you can use forever and ever.
I love it because again, like I focus a lot on psychology, right? And so that first part you said is, how is this going to work for you? What's important to you?
Mm.
Because if you don't start from there, the psychology is working against you from day one,
Yep.
and you don't want that. So that's an excellent place to start. And I agree with that 100%. I do a similar thing. I start off with, okay, where do you want to be, right? What's important to you? What matters the most to you? Because some people, they just want to travel. Like my family is about experiences, not things. That's kind of how we live. But other people might like things. I have one friend who hates traveling for whatever reason. He just doesn't want to go anywhere, but he likes having fancy watches and stuff like that, right? So that's his thing. And it's like, okay, well, that's great. Like if that's your thing, that's your thing. I'm not going to tell you not to do it. It's your
Yep.
money, right? But if you're trying to build long-term wealth, you have to understand, as you said, the big picture around it, right? And how do you get from one area to the next? So speaking about the big picture, you would build what I would say is significant wealth as a nurse, right? You're over 400K at this point.
Yeah.
That's significant. And if you think about it, even if you were to stop right now and just let it compound until your retirement age, you're done, right?
Yeah.
As far unless you want to live some crazy lifestyle, you're done. So it's impressive by any standard. But I'm curious about your definition, right? So you mentioned that you started this journey figuring out or finding out about financial freedom
Mhm.
or financial independence. What does that term, financial freedom or financial, whichever one you want to look at, or both of them, what does that mean to you? And why do you think it's important?
So I focus on financial freedom more. Financial independence is more practical, and financial freedom is more emotional, in my opinion. So
Mm-hmm.
there's two ways I'm going to go about answering this. One is how I feel, and also I did kind of like a consensus of people. Actually, put a post
Mm-hmm.
out in like a Facebook group and asked people what it means to them. For me, I think my first feeling of yes, I have financial freedom. I remember when my building, I live in a condo, and there was an assessment that was coming for the elevator. They told us this when we bought the place, and it just seemed to never come to fruition. Never heard anything about it. It's like, oh yeah, it's coming, it's coming,
Mm-hmm.
it's coming. Finally, the day came, and you had to make a decision within like 30 days. And the decision was this: you either pay in full your part of the assessment, which was like $9,000 something dollars,
Mm-hmm.
or you do a loan. And when I did the math, it would cost over $12,000. And the fact that I didn't have to freak out about where this money was going to come from, and I could sit down with my
Mm-hmm.
husband and calmly decide, like, hey, where are we at now with our goals? Which one makes more sense for us? And then decide to do the lump sum and be able to pay it and not sweat it. That is freaking freedom to me. Like
Right.
the ability to make a decision, not just because whether or not I could afford something, because that's not a question anymore. It's a matter of how I want to do it. And so also when I asked other people like what their thoughts were, it's like being able to travel without debt. It's, being able to provide for their children without stress. Like these things don't require millions of dollars to accomplish. Like
Right.
it's just a feeling of today. Like, can you make that happen? So your financial freedom is your vision for your money and how you want to feel about it. And what gets you to not stress, but feel like, I can do things with my money versus my money's limiting me from doing things.
Absolutely. I like the way JL Collins put it on one interview he did when he talks about financial independence, because he's very much like, I'm not the retire early. That's why I said he and I are
Mhm.
like spirit animals, although he's much older than I am. Someone came to him and said, well, I don't want to retire. I love what I do. And he said, it's not about forcing yourself into retirement. It's about having options, right?
Options.
Options. It's about you being able to say, you know what? Because I have fully admitted, like the way my brain, because I'm also neurodivergent, the way my brain works, I know I can never retire. It's not an issue of money. It's that my brain has to be doing something all the time, or I just get incredibly bored and like, I don't know, not lose it, but you get what I'm saying. Like
Yeah.
my brain has to be active. Otherwise, some people, they have to be running or they have to be, physically active, or they like my son is one of those where if he's not physically active for the majority of the day, he cannot go to bed at night because he did not get the energy out of him. That's how my brain is. I cannot go to bed at night unless I drain my brain of all it has during the day. So I know that I personally will never retire. But other people, they might not want that. They might say, you know what? I want to get to the point where I can just go live on a beach somewhere and never have to work again. Now for me, that sounds incredibly boring. I love the beach and I love the whole thing, but I couldn't do it forever, right? So it's about options, in my opinion. And like
Yep.
you said, options are what matter here, right? You have the option of choosing what you want to do. And that whole theory kind of resonates with me. So I think sometimes people think financial freedom means, as you said, having millions of dollars, but it's not that. It's something way more. It's practical and achievable, right? So for someone who feels like they're starting from scratch, because I think a lot of people coming to this podcast and probably also coming to your business are starting from zero. Or maybe they've started before and they didn't quite get where they wanted to go and they kind of gave up. Maybe they're 30, 40, or even 50 plus and they feel behind. In your opinion, what's the very first thing they should focus on?
I think the first thing is having a vision for your money. It's ironic to me that I talk about mindset and vision and so much, because I'm a very practical type A personality. And when I came to realize how much your mindset plays into your finances, I was kind of like, wow, like I'm going to start peddling this stuff too, Because
Yep.
I was
It's
like,
almost everything.
yeah, it's so powerful. Like, you could be upset with where you are today and decide, I want to do better. And so some things that you can do, I think the easiest thing to do is to find people who are doing the thing you're trying to accomplish. But first you have to find out what you're trying to accomplish. So it's kind of like a two-step thing. I'm kind of cheating a little
Right.
bit.
No, that makes sense, right? Because if you get in with the wrong crowd,
Yep.
like,
It
you
can
know what I'm
send you
saying? Because
some different paths that
right,
you have
we
no
talked
interest
about this.
in.
There's a ton of I use the word scams a lot, and that's probably not the right term to use. But there's a lot of misinformation and stuff you should not be doing that is all over social media. So as you said, that's a great point. Find a group of people who are trying to do what you're doing, but you got to understand what it is you're trying to do
Yes.
first.
Yes. And then two,
Yes.
like, once you find those people, like, so I think there's a lot of quotes in like that. The people you're around will kind of dictate who you are. So the more people that you put around that are trying to accomplish this goal, the easier it is for you to attain it. The reason I think it's so challenging for people to attain their financial goals is because they're tempted by things like, they have friends that spend a lot, or like people that they feel like have a lifestyle that they want to attain, and that kind of like without actually aligning in values. And so when you surround yourself with people that are doing things that aren't your goals, that aren't your aspirations, but then because of I don't want to call it peer pressure, that sounds like a kid, but it's just what life is. Like you are
Right.
going to behave the way people around you behave. So by surrounding yourself with people who are, and that doesn't have to be in person, because some people don't have these kind of people in their lives. This could be somebody you're following on social media. This could be a podcast you're listening to. This could be a blogger you're following. It could be a coach, that can actually help support you through this. It just needs to be in alignment with what you want.
Exactly. And I think also the vision part of it matters, because when I was young, there was this one neighborhood, and I grew up in San Antonio, Texas. And so those from there will know the neighborhood. I'm not going to name it because I don't want to get negative association. But this is one neighborhood that is very high price houses. And I remember, especially when I was in high school, sometimes I would drive through that neighborhood and see these big, beautiful houses. We call them today McMansions and things like that, right? And thinking, man, if I could just have that house, if I could just live in that house, right? I never did. However, I think the moment where I finally realized how much vision matters was that neighborhood and those houses kind of set my goal and set my vision when I was younger. And then I moved out to California, right? Worked in tech, of course, completely different paradigm in terms of like income levels and all that kind of stuff. And I remember going back home one day, this time again, I'm in my 30s. I go into that neighborhood and I'm like, I could buy that house cash. But this is the important part. I don't want that house anymore. And that's where it was like, I get it now. Like it clicked. That was the moment it clicked for me. It's like, because it's like anything else, right? When you want it and you want it so bad, you will do just about anything to get there. And then at some point, probably realize the mistake you made. But if you do it The other way is which I refer to as the prepaid lifestyle, where you have the
Yes.
money to buy what you want. Because you save that money and earn that money has far more meaning to you at that point. And now you're questioning whether you really want that thing
Hmm.
or you'd rather keep the money, because at this point, the money isn't a thing. The money is your freedom, right? So that's kind of the differentiator I made there. So I agree with you 100%. You've got to get your vision in place first, right? And I don't want to downplay and say that's the easy part, but that's the easier part,
Hmm.
right? Because you can formulate that by yourself. You don't need to pay for that. You can sit down and figure out what your vision is. And then that's the first step outside of your door, right? To
Hmm.
say, okay, this is my journey now. I know what the vision is, kind of like Lord of the Rings type thing, right? You're going to get to Mount Doom at some point, but you got to put your foot outside the door first to get there. And that's kind of the hard part. So before we wrap up, I want to make sure that people know how to find you and continue learning. Where's the best place for people to connect with you?
So the best place is actually my newsletter. So if you were to look in the show notes, you'll find the link to my freebie, which is a 3 steps to financial freedom. These are the first 3 steps that I took in order to get to where I am today. And because I want everybody to attain this, right? Like you have to start. And so I want to show you how simple it is to start. And then like the outcome of what's going to be, which is what you see in the stories of everybody who kind of goes through this. So the email list is the most consistent way to like get in touch with me. It's also I send resources about mindset, saving money, debt payoff, and investing every week there. But if you are averse to sharing your email address with me, I get that. You can visit me on
Mm-hmm.
Instagram at Our Green Life NJ. That is my handle, NJ like New Jersey. And yeah, you could visit me there and get to know me there.
Thank you for saying that. And by the way, as Prisca mentioned, all of this will be in the show notes. So if you are unsure about it, you can look in the show notes, whether you're getting this on Spotify, YouTube, or Apple Podcasts. Also on our website, simplefinancebites.com, every time I publish a new episode of the podcast, it goes on the website and has the full show notes there. So you can get links to all of the stuff she just mentioned. So is there anything else you would like to say to the audience out there before we roll this one out?
I think one of my favorite things I like to share with my community is don't build a budget like based off what other people dictate your budget should look like. Instead of trying to squeeze your life into a budget, build a budget around your life and you'll be infinitely more successful.
That's excellent advice. I don't touch budgets too much in my podcast and my stuff. So I'm glad that you came on and you started talking about that. I talk a little bit about budgeting, but approach that a little bit differently just because as you said earlier, more of like, I've automated all these things already. So what's left over is what I can live off of. But to get there, you have to start from the other end, which
Yep.
is set the budget up, right? So I'm so glad you came on to give that knowledge to the audience. So just to remind everybody, this isn't about being smart or stupid with money. It doesn't matter if your parents never talked to you about money, if you made mistakes in your 20s, or if you feel like you're starting from zero at 35 or 55. What matters is that you start now with simple, consistent steps. Prisca proved that you can go from financial uncertainty to building real wealth in just a few years by focusing on the basics, understanding your expenses, being intentional with your spending, and starting to invest simply and consistently. If you're feeling inspired to take action, start with Prisca's 3-step framework. Look at your current expenses and see what's negotiable. Start building that emergency fund, even if it's just $1,000 to begin with, and then begin learning about simple investing. Remember, the best time to start was yesterday, but the second best time is right now. You can find all of Prisca's resources in the show notes, and as always, if this episode helped you, share it with someone else who needs to hear that their financial education can start today. Until then, take care of your money so it can take care of you.